My colleagues, this particular topic I have been speaking for the last few years, almost every year, particularly for the benefit of the students, the postgraduate trainees and the house surgeons of this hospital, as well as to recapitulate our knowledge of physiology, of respiratory physiology, which we had learned during our college days, so that while administering critical care or administering basic care also to our patients in this hospital, we can do justice to them and do certain things which are advisable, and there are certain things which are not advisable. Now, to begin with, let us go to the history of oxygen, how the importance of oxygen, which was there already in our atmosphere, it was felt. First in 1773, Carl Wilhelm Scheele first discovered oxygen. A year later, Priestley first published a paper on oxygen, and even 3 years later, Lavoisier, the famous Lavoisier, he coined the term oxygen. In 1783, French physician Galen first time used oxygen therapy as a remedial measure in disease, and in 1878, about 100 years later, Paul Bert identified oxygen toxicity, that there is a flip side of using oxygen as well. Now, this is a case scenario. I wanted to start the presentation with this, that this is the kind of scenario which we very often come across, most of us. A 70-year male, known case of COPD, presents with respiratory distress. He is diaphoretic and agitated. History of progressive dyspnea with worsening productive cough and fever and chills. On examination, blood pressure is okay, heart rate is tachycardia. Has got a little bit of temperature, respiratory rate is very, very high, and respiratory rate is, you can see here, 33, and a little bit of desaturation of 80%. So the question is, does the patient need oxygen, and how much is the need, and how to deliver? Basically, on this premise, I would deliver my presentation today, that how you are going to do justice to this patient, and what kind of, what modality of oxygen therapy you are going to use in this particular patient. What is the biological role of oxygen? A quick recap of physiology, as I have already said. It is essential for life as a source of energy. Its critical oxygen tension is very, very important. The cellular oxygen tension at which the mitochondrial activity begins to decrease. After that, we know that oxygen cascade, and after below that, the mitochondrial activity particularly ceases. So therefore, it is very important to maintain that critical oxygen tension. And we must remember that PaO2, or partial pressure of oxygen in arterial blood, is a useful indicator of pulmonary gas exchange, but it does not measure oxygen delivery to the tissues. So even if you get a value of PaO2 in ABG, it doesn't mean that everything is fine, because the ultimate idea of achieving that particular PaO2 is to deliver oxygen to the tissues, which it is not going to denote. So hypoxia is inadequate oxygen supply to body tissues, either entire body or localized region, and its symptoms depend on rapidity and severity of the decrease of the arterial partial pressure of oxygen. So this is, in a nutshell, is definition of hypoxia. And how the evolution occurs? There are three basic types of hypoxia: the fulminant hypoxia, the acute hypoxia, and chronic hypoxia. These are the three categories of patients which we very often come across. The fulminant hypoxia, when the aircraft loses the cabin pressure above 30,000 feet and there is no supplemental oxygen available. That is fulminant hypoxia, and occurs in seconds, unconsciousness very quickly, and brain death in 4 to 5 minutes. Acute hypoxia between 25 to 40 millimeter mercury of arterial PO2 at altitudes of 18 to 25,000 feet. The Everest climbers and all those people, Symptoms similar to those of ethyl alcohol, lack of coordination, slow reflexes, overconfidence, and eventually unconsciousness, coma and death in minutes to hours if the regulatory mechanisms of the body are inadequate. And chronic hypoxia between 40 to 60 millimeter of mercury, it also occurs at altitudes of 10 to 18,000 feet for an extended periods of time. These are the most clinical causes of hypoxia which fall in this particular category, and symptoms are very similar to those of severe fatigue, dyspnea, shortness of breath, and respiratory arrhythmias. So how do we assess hypoxia and oxygen status? Because after that we are going to deliver oxygen therapy. If we do not assess it properly, then possibly the injudicious use of oxygen is going to be detrimental for the patient. So the first step is ABG. As we all know, the arterial blood gas analysis, which denotes adequacy of ventilation by the PCO2 value and the acid-base status of the body, the pH. So these are the two important parameters. There are many others, but these are the very beginning two important parameters from ABG. And the second step is estimate oxygen content. These are a few, for the students particularly, these are the few of the formulas which we had read in our physiology, but obviously without use it gets rusted. So I just thought that you share these with all of you. The oxygen content is the very important aspect of our body, and it is usually, normally it is 20 ml per 100 ml of our blood. So how it is calculated? It is 1.39 multiplied by hemoglobin multiplied by SaO2 plus 0.003 multiplied by PO2. You can see here that the partial pressure of oxygen in arterial blood, it is multiplied only by 0.002. So this value is not so much important as the importance is this, because here the hemoglobin level is much more important because it is multiplied by 1.39. So although we consider this to be a very good and important parameter of the status of hypoxia, it is also even more important than actually the PO2 value. So if a patient is very, very anemic, even if you increase the PO2 to a large extent, say up to 200 millimeter of mercury, even then the oxygen content of blood, which should be 20 ml per 100 ml, it will not be achieved ever. And the third step is calculate the oxygen delivered to assess the cardiovascular status and adequate blood supply to the tissue, which is our ultimate aim, whether the blood is being supplied to the tissue, oxygenated blood. Normally it is 1000 ml per minute, that is the delivery, and it is calculated by cardiac output and the oxygen content, which we had derived earlier. And thereby oxygen extraction, that how much oxygen is being extracted at the tissue level, that can also be calculated from this formula. I am not going into the very details of this. Now assessment of hypoxia and status, these are the few gadgets which are available with us nowadays. Almost every ward, every ICU are having this, a pulse oximeter, a capnograph, which actually denotes the EtCO2, end tidal carbon dioxide. What we are getting from ABG is the partial pressure of carbon dioxide in arterial blood. But if we quickly want to have a go from minute to minute, because ABG cannot be done on a minute to minute basis. It's not a realistic method. It's a kind of virtual thing which had happened to the patient, say 5-10 minutes before. But this particular machine, capnograph, gives us the value on a minute to minute basis, and invasive of course is ABG analysis, as I have already said. This particular curve is very, very important for all of us to understand, the oxyhemoglobin dissociation curve, or shortly known as ODC, and this actually denotes the hemoglobin's affinity for oxygen, or how readily hemoglobin acquires or releases oxygen molecules into the fluid that surrounds it. So that is actually the important factor, how the tissues are going to be delivered the oxygen which the blood is carrying, because that is the final utility of oxygen being carried by blood. And at P50, you can see that at P50 the at 50% saturation here, you can see that the PO2 is around 27 millimeter mercury. So the 50% saturation is achieved only at the level of 27 millimeter mercury. So as low as 27. So it's not so bad. As I had already said that 20 to 40 is acute hypoxia. Even then, at 27 millimeter mercury, 50% of the blood is saturated. But after that is a sigmoid shaped curve. You can see that the 100% level is almost never achievable or kind of infinity. And 100% is actually saturated when the PO2 value goes to 700 millimeter mercury. So it is very, most of the machines, many of our machines actually show us 100% oxygen saturation, which is a kind of misnomer and a wrong thing which is being, most of the machines show us, because 100% oxygen saturation is almost never achievable, because 700 millimeter mercury of partial pressure of oxygen in arterial blood is also very rare. So that's why it is important to understand this sigmoid shaped curve and how the oxygen is being carried by blood and how it is delivered to the tissue. When we talk about left sheaf of this curve, when this curve goes here, that means there is increased oxygen hemoglobin affinity for oxygen, so the release will be slow. The oxygen will not be released easily for the use of tissues. And what are the conditions? When the H ion decreases, the PCO2 value decreases, temperature decreases. So the requirement actually also falls. When we induce hypothermia in certain subset of patients, then the requirement also falls, and thereby it is a nature's this thing that it shifts to the left, and thereby the oxygen affinity of hemoglobin increases and release will be slow and low because the requirement is also low. And in opposite fashion, when the H ion concentration increases, PCO2 value increases, and temperature increases, and the 2,3 dPg in RBCs, they increase, there is a right shift, and thereby there is a decreased hemoglobin affinity for oxygen, and the release will be faster, because in this situation, when there is fever, when there is hypercarbia, when there is all these situations, the requirement of oxygen is much more. So the release will have to be faster. So this is very important. I just wanted to share with you what is the importance of ODC and in what conditions this ODC helps us to determine that what kind of situation we are in, and whether acidosis is there from ABG, whether we should correct it or not, or the alkalosis is there, whether we should correct it or not. There are few common oxygen indices which we commonly follow in our day-to-day practice in critical care and ventilatory management. I am not going into the details. These are the indices which can be derivable from the ABG values and from your saturation values from the pulse oximeter. So these are the indices. And this is the oxygen cascade, which we all know that from the atmosphere. From the atmospheric PiO2, which is about 160 millimeter mercury, when it comes to mitochondria, it is only about 5 millimeter mercury. So, there is a rapid fall in a stepwise fashion when it reaches mitochondria, but even 5 millimeter mercury of partial pressure of oxygen is adequate for mitochondria to perform and to work adequately. So that is very important to understand also, because we always try to achieve 100, 150, 200 millimeter mercury of PO2 in our ABG values, which is actually not necessary. Even at lower levels, I just showed you that at 60 millimeter mercury of PO2, most of the tissues in our body, they work quite adequately and efficiently. So these are the factors which affecting oxygenation at various levels. The inspired oxygen affected by barometric pressure and oxygen concentration. When it comes to the alveolar gas in the lungs, it is affected by the oxygen consumption and the alveolar ventilation. When it comes to arterial blood, it is affected by the dead space ventilation, whether V2 mismatch is there or the shunt is there. And when it comes to the cellular level, the mitochondrial level, it is being affected by the cardiac output and the hemoglobin concentration. I had showed you in that particular formula earlier that hemoglobin concentration is even more important than many other things. There are many types of hypoxia. I am not going into the details of this. We all know that hypoxic hypoxia, stagnant hypoxia, anemic hypoxia, histotoxic hypoxia, and there are these arterial PO2, venous PO2, these things, either decreases or increases. So this is a little, it will be difficult to make you understand in this short span of time. So I'll skip this slide and go straight to the different modalities of oxygen therapy which we can deliver to this subset of patients, particularly the patient which I had narrated at the beginning of the presentation. So the oxygen therapy is the administration of oxygen at concentrations greater than room air. We all know the room air which contains 21% of oxygen, with goal of treating or preventing the symptoms of or manifestations of hypoxia. So basically that is the aim. Indications is documented hypoxemia, severe trauma. After trauma also, even if you cannot document, do a ABG, even then your oxygen therapy should be instituted. Acute myocardial infarction, this is another situation when the oxygen demand of the body increases tremendously. Acute care situations leading to hypoxemia, any critical care scenario. And short-term therapy like post-anesthesia recovery, which we very often administer. Contraindications, there is nothing specific of oxygen therapy. Only if the indications are present, there is no contraindication. If the indications are not present, then of course that is a kind of relative contraindication. What are the goals of oxygen therapy? First is to correct hypoxemia, because that is, per definition, that is the goal, by raising alveolar and blood levels of oxygen, and easiest objective to attain and measure. And secondly, it is decreasing symptoms of hypoxemia, because the symptoms of hypoxemia will be minimized when the hypoxemia gets corrected. Supplemental oxygen can help relieve symptoms of hypoxia, lessens dyspnea and work of breathing, improve mental function. Thirdly, minimizing cardiopulmonary workload. That is one of the major things in acute MI situations. This cardiopulmonary system will compensate for hypoxemia by increasing ventilation to get more oxygen, increase work of breathing, increasing cardiac output, and it will be hard on the heart, especially if it is disease. So that's why extra oxygen is being pumped in to help the cardiopulmonary system. And hypoxia causes pulmonary vasoconstriction and pulmonary hypertension, and these things also should be kept in mind. And these cause an increased workload on the right side of the heart, and over time the right heart will become more muscular and then eventually fail, a condition which is commonly known as cor pulmonale. So the methods of oxygen administration, there are various methods, few of them are available here on the table also. But before that, the method selection depends upon the required concentration of oxygen. We first understand that what is the concentration of oxygen being required by the patient, and then we should go for the proper method of oxygen delivery. During oxygen therapy, the relative dangers of hypoxia and oxygen toxicity should be kept in mind. The patient's GCS and patient's comfort, level and range of FiO2 required, and extent of humidification required. These are the things which should be kept in mind while selecting the modality of oxygen therapy. All systems, whatever system you apply, these things will be required. You will require a source of oxygen, you will require a flow meter, you will require oxygen tubing from whatever be the source from there to the patient. You will require a humidifier, because dry gas over a very long period of time will cause mucosal irritation and damage to the ciliary body of our respiratory system, and the delivery, finally the delivery device. So these are the basic 5 components of all the systems of oxygen therapy. Whatever be the system, these things will be required in all of them. And of course there are supply can be, as I had said, can be from central pipeline, from cylinder, from oxygen concentrator, or nowadays liquid oxygen is also available. This is one of the picture of oxygen concentrator, very commonly used in many a household for the COPD patients, because they apply CPAP or for many other things. They get one oxygen concentrator at home, and that will actually derive the oxygen from the room air, then concentrate it and delivers to the patient at the desired FiO2. Humidification, as I had said, is very, very important when oxygen flow is 4 liter or more, and prevents the drying of the mucous membrane, formation of tenacious sputum, and decreases the loss of heat, because that is also important. So if we want to classify the therapy devices, there are basically two types of devices. Low flow systems, which are variable performance, but that means the performance of the device is not fixed over a period of time, and high flow systems, which are fixed performance systems.